They see media as art and science. From Crux, here's mediaFWD. And from Bank of America, please welcome Lou Pascalis. And rejoining our Trillia family is Dave Bolger.
For the record, we spent more time preparing for our movements than we did for what we're going to talk about today. A lot of pressure on that one. You did look good, by the way. Thank you both for joining us. The big theme for today is preparing for 2020. And a lot of what we've been discussed today, and I think a lot of what we'll talk about today, is obviously the growth of technology, the availability of data is what's driving a lot of the future innovation. Vivek, you said at an interesting crossroads of all of that with what you're doing at Crux. Curious to hear your take on, as the room tries to make sense of the data that they sit on, third-party data and everything that happens, how do you prepare marketers for what's to come?
So, this is a very self-serving answer, obviously, but I think that the more effort and investment you can make in consolidating all of the data that you have into one central asset, into one central platform, into one central system, I think that's job number one. I think that a lot of marketers that I talk to, they have preconceived notions about what can fit in, what cannot fit in, what they should include, what they shouldn't include. I think that's where the technology conversation becomes really important, right? I think instead of saying, hey, can you do this for me? Saying, or can you solve this problem for me? Saying, I want to do these types of things. How can your technology help me do that? What do you need from me in order for you to get your technology to do that? I think these are types of things that marketers should start to consider as they start to prepare for 2020, especially when they work with technology platforms like ours and others.
So identify the challenge, identify what you're trying to solve for, rather than developing a data strategy for the sake of it.
No. I think the data strategy is important, but don't limit the technology to just solve the problem at hand. Instead, work with technology platforms such as ourselves as your trusted advisors to come and help you get to 2020 by laying out your vision for 2020 in front of us.
So from a marketer's perspective, you don't have to tell me Bank of America's vision, although I'm sure everyone would love to know what it is.
How much time do you have?
But how do you approach something like
that? Well,
that?
It's interesting. Something that you said, a couple of years ago, I was sitting with our technology partners, and we were designing what we now call our insights engine, which is this single source of truth across the entire enterprise, which takes advantage of our own data as well as the data we get from our advertising activity. And my colleague in tech said, and we were establishing our filters, and said something interesting. He said, we will create one of our filters around valuable data. We only want to collect valuable data. And I stopped him and I said, well, okay, how would you define valuable data? And he gave me a very good textbook answer based on an ROI understanding of where we sort of were at the time of the conversation. I said, well, but you know what? There's no way that the fact that I enjoy Formula One racing and sailing would ever be seen as valuable in that filter. But a year from now, as we're personalizing media, as we're personalizing our content, we might want to ingest that fact, we might want to leverage that fact, and if we have not collected it, we've missed an enormous opportunity to add relevance to what we're putting in front of people. It's a little bit like Moneyball now. We have to harness every signal, we have to store it away, we have to do it in a privacy-compliant, anonymized way, but we must make sure that what might be super important, what might not seem super important right now today, is nevertheless available for future interactions, because it's kind of like a cocktail party conversation at the scale of digital now, and we need to know where we were in the conversation and what might be relevant to the next part of it. Missing that, and you're that person at the cocktail conversation who says, nice to meet you, even though we've met 2 or 3 previous times, and you don't want to be that.
Just to add to that, I think that's super important. That's one thing that we emphasize both in our shop and every time we talk to prospects, clients, customers, whatnot. It's that never say no to data, right? Just collect as much of it as you can, because you don't know what will be relevant 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years from now. So collecting, capturing everything, absolutely right.
So Lou mentioned personalization. That's a big topic of conversation today, and I think that's the idea behind where we're going in the future is this idea of Shangri-La for marketers, which is true one-to-one marketing. Is that something that you think, Vivek, we're headed towards?
I think so. I think that more and more marketers are now starting to realize that that dream of one-to-one personalization is starting to become more and more of a reality. We're not there yet, right? We're quite far from it. But I think all of the raw material that we would need to create the recipes around one-to-one marketing are being put in place right now. Some people are doing it better than others, obviously, because they thought about this 3 years ago and they've laid out the strategy and the vision for that. And some are just getting started. Some are starting to realize, well, if I do it with gum, tape, and glue, it'll work maybe for 3 months or so, but then longer term, it won't work at scale and whatnot. Yeah. So that's, I think, where we're headed.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about sustainable marketing as really the sort of way forward for us. And what that is it's investing in relationships and thinking about them over time. I think one of the big challenges, if you look at this personalization journey, there are about 3 massive tasks. 1, connect the plumbing. That's where the data comes from. 2, build the insights and orchestration engine that really is optimized for a lifetime value relationship. And 3, and I think the third by far is the most difficult today, is to reimagine the creative part of the equation so that we can produce so much more rich, varied content and experiences and utilities so that once we have all this insight and once we know who we're talking to, we have a trove of 24 things that might be relevant in this moment, in this context, that we can select from as opposed to 1 or 2. And today it's hard for marketers to get their heads around that. What's the ROI in this piece of content? We might not know for 3 quarters. And today we don't rationalize like that. So we've kind of come up with our own truth at Bank of America. We say design for audiences, deliver to individuals. And it's really an interim step if you think about it. But we imagine the 16 or 18 individual segments that we serve. And then we start to come up with content that will be relevant to those audiences when we see them in various contexts. So it's a step in the right direction. And more so than anything else, what it did, a lot of our colleagues in the periphery of marketing who were hearing about this personalization, hearing about this being audience-driven, they could get their head around design for audiences and deliver to individuals because in a way, we've always been doing that in marketing. The difference is there's much more refinement about who those audiences are and what their interests are. And so now we've got to build around that so we can service all that insight with really great, rich content.
I want to dig on the content piece a little bit more because that's, again, a big topic of today. Karen opened talking about the importance of meaningful and curated content. Vivek, is there anybody that you're working with now that Lou talked about the measurement of ROI on a piece of content, but I think the future state is what BuzzFeed talks about, which is using content to influence data creation. Are you seeing anybody doing that in a good way?
Yes, we're having conversations with some clients actually who want to leverage content strategies like that. But just to quickly come back to what Lou said about there's the data, there's the plumbing as he called it, and then the insights and orchestration engines, and then the creative aspect which comes from the content. It works really well if those 3 are connected in a loop. Yeah. Data feeds insights. You use that to drive content, and then the results from that go into data, and you kind of draw a circle like that. So I think what we're seeing with some of our clients who have taken a content personalization type strategy for their primary use of data is actually for content personalization. We're doing that for them. So I think, but again, back to technology and use cases and problems and whatnot, I think laying out a vision like that, what Lou just did, I think is step 1. And then having your technology team or a vendor or a partner, whoever, to come in and say, here's how we can collect all of this together to create the content strategy for you, I think is what the marketers should
So you're not here to say that the human element is going away and the algorithm is going to replace everybody.
No, not at all. In
Good
fact,
news, everybody. We're safe.
No. So it's funny. It's funny. On Friday, one of our investors, or former investors now, I should say, he called me and said, "I'm hearing a lot about crux in AI. Do you guys do AI?" I said, look, we don't do AI in the strict sense of the word. Artificial intelligence, we don't do that. What we do, augmented intelligence. It's human guided intelligence. You have the technology, but humans are guiding it to derive the decisions and the actions that they want the technology to take. So that's my 2 cents on that.
You see the use of data in influencing and informing the content creation?
Yeah, it has to. I mean, when you hear data as a marketer, immediately translate that in your head to personalization. Immediately translate that in your head to relevance. And then it's not this big, scary thing with, Roman numerals and all sorts of complex equations. It's literally what your front-end retail people have been doing in their heads for the last, 100 years in sales. And now we're trying to do that at the scale of digital. So we know how to do this calculus intuitively. Now we have to do it as well empirically. And that's all data is. It's a key to unlocking greater relevance for individuals and, frankly, competing for their competing with attention. We're doing this funny thing in marketing. We're now competing with the very people we are trying to engage, because all of a sudden in this era, every consumer is a publisher. Every consumer is putting stuff out that is more relevant to his or her friends and family. That's very hard as a marketer trying to serve, half the households in the United States, like Bank of America, to compete with. So we've got to understand interests, we've got to understand need state, we've got to understand context, and we've got to understand how to leverage all that and put something that's going to compete with those, with Aunt Sally's cat videos, and be more relevant and have more utility. And I think we're all learning that right now. I don't think anybody who sits here and says, and we've got the answer, and we're not there yet. We're in the renaissance of marketing in the sense that we can now be experimental and shed a lot of those rules. We have this expression about best practices. And I think best practices were the worst enemy of marketing because they caused us to be optimizers, not innovators. And we're in an era where innovation is required and optimization is commoditization. And you really need to balance what's working right now with what you need to learn will work in the future.
So in the spirit of shedding best practices, Shar from Forrester this morning talked about the idea of reach and frequency as a key metric or key planning tool is a bit antiquated and outdated. And as we talk about the move towards greater personalization and customized content and so forth, that starts to feel true. So then, as a media communications professional, what's the next metric? Is mass scale, is reach meaningless to us in the future, in the near future?
It's a great question, and it prompted me to do a little bit of thinking, as I was thinking about this panel. We all want mass reach. But mass reach does not require mass messaging to take advantage of it. We have been in the business for 60 years of making lowest common denominator advertising, hoping that we won't offend anyone, hoping it will be relevant to everybody, and delivering it ubiquitously. Now we are in an era where through addressable television, through all sorts of digital and mobile technology, we can take advantage of that culturally convening moment, the context that you get from being at the Academy Awards or being in the Super Bowl or being at those events where everyone comes together, but deliver different messages to different individuals in different environments based on what we know, based on the signal that we get about them. So mass audiences still matter, but mass messaging may be the thing that we need to move away from in favor of much more contextualized messaging.
No, I think, look, reach and frequency will always matter to marketers because you want to reach a lot of people. When you say mass reach, the way I think about that is it's not just one global mass reach. There are smaller masses, what Lou was calling his 18 or 16, whatever number he had of audience segments, right? Tomorrow it may not be 18, it may be 180, but there are 180 masses that you're reaching. But within each mass, still frequency will be important. Nobody wants to be bombarded with the same messaging over and over again. Right. So I think reach and frequency will continue to matter. It just won't be mass anymore. It'll be lots and lots of masses, the way I look at it.
What in the closing minutes here? So we're talking about 2020. Where does Crux go from here, and what are we looking for you in 4 years?
Boy, 2020, that's a long way out for a technology platform because so much changes so quickly. So I think I'll give you the cliched answer, which is the integration of all the different channels. Now, especially as now we're part of Salesforce, like figuring out how to work with all the Salesforce clouds that are there. There's sales, there's service, there's marketing, there's analytics. Taking all of that together and creating one joint integrated platform that can be used by marketers
of course, to improve the overall marketing messages that they're sending their consumers. I think that's where we're headed. Whether we get there in a year, 2 years, 3 years, and 4 years, I don't know. But I sure hope we get there before 2020.
And what's your hope for what you want to do with the banking?
It's such a world of possibility. I will tell you, I'm more excited about the various aspects of audio than anything I've been excited about in a while. Our ability to be, service people much more intuitively and, in a passive way, as Shar mentioned earlier, where we'll anticipate needs, the ability to be so much more relevant in their daily lives. So for me, I'm excited about what all this means to new connectivity in the area of audio.
I think we'll leave it there. Guys, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.